continue today, affecting the lives of working people across every corner of God's earth. The consequences of this collapse have been palpable and painful across every continent, across every country, and across virtually every community in the world. Across developed economies, across developing economies where the defences against recession are much more ragged. The World Bank has advised us that an extra 53 million people will be trapped in poverty this year alone as a result of the crisis. They advise us that 200,000 to 400,000 children per year may die from 2009 onwards if the current crisis persists. These are the human costs of the economic crisis. Each of them, each and every one of them, is a human face. A factory worker losing her job in regional Australia, a farm labourer losing his child in rural Africa. So, to answer the great moral question of the ages, what then is to be done? The challenge for all governments is to rebuild an economic system in which all, not just some, can have trust. That means understanding what has gone wrong with the current system. It also means reaffirming that which is still right with the current system. It means, in a word, getting the balance right, affirming the right to individual enterprise while reaffirming our responsibility to the common good. Over the last quarter of a century, this balance has begun to be eroded. Unfettered free markets became worshipped as a god, and we know that that god was false. This ideology held that markets were self-regulating, that government regulation of such markets was interference, and that the unrestrained pursuit of self-interest was not only morally legitimate, but equally to be morally encouraged. The time has come to restore the balance. This must begin by affirming the freedom, empowerment and prosperity that can come from open markets at home and abroad. Economic history teaches us that closed markets impoverish humankind, and there is nothing ennobling at all about poverty. But open markets must be properly regulated with transparency, with impartiality, and with fairness for all who would compete within those markets, not just for some. And we must equally accept that markets may fail, and we must therefore provide for universal public goods such as universal health, universal education, and a safety net for all, public goods by whatever means they may be delivered. All these require the active agency of government as opposed to an ideology that says government intervention is by definition bad. It is time to rediscover the proper agency of government across the world. In other words, government should balance the market to ensure that both individual liberty and the common good are enhanced. The ideological dichotomy of our age is that one should somehow cancel out the other. This represents the polarisation of the extreme left and the extreme right. Whereas our age is calling on us to restore the proper balance. For it is only by restoring balance between market and government, between individual and community, that we can rebuild trust in an economic system that encourages each and cares for all. There is another dimension to the current crisis which challenges us all, and that is the current crisis is simultaneously local and global. All of us are legitimately seized with the impacts of this crisis which confront us in our own local communities. Those who lose their job, those who lose their house, those who lose their marriage, those who lose their self-respect. The unfolding social cost of this economic crisis confronts us starkly. We therefore must act with every resource we can, with every agency of government, with every action of community to tend to the wounds of those who now suffer through this crisis through no fault of their own, and to act wherever we can to prevent people from falling into joblessness and despair. This must be our first responsibility. But we must equally be reminded of John Wesley's great proclamation, "The world is my parish." The world is my parish. Because beyond our shores, and beyond that which we can readily see, the unfolding suffering from this crisis in the developing world is growing apace. For those of us in developed economies, this is the unseen cost of the crisis, the invisible face of the global recession. But in conscience, and for people of conscience, we cannot stand idly by. So what does this mean? It means that we cannot, under any circumstances, sacrifice the Millennium Development Goals. It means that we cannot shred our solemn commitments on official development assistance. It means we cannot strangle developing country trade by adopting new protectionist measures in the developed world. It means we must help unclog the arteries of developing country trade with effective trade finance facilities for the period ahead. And it means we cannot pretend that the challenge of climate change, both for developed and developing countries, will somehow simply fade away. All these things require global action on an unprecedented global scale. Just as all those things necessary for the recovery of the general economy as a whole require global action on an unprecedented global scale. And herein lies a further challenge for us all: to act in the global good while recognising at the same time that acting in the global good is also acting in the national good. For centuries, we have been conditioned to think otherwise, whereas the requirement of this age is for global coordination and cooperation on an unprecedented scale. The challenge with the current crisis, as with climate change, now lies beyond the scope of any single nation-state to